Hello, 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 and welcome to episode number 20 of Fast Casual, Landon's official podcast, brought to you today from New York City and San Francisco, my old hometown. My name's Alex Mann, and I'm your host again. It's great to be back after a week's break. As I like to say, every restaurant has a story, and so without further delay, let's get the show on the road. I'm delighted to say I'll be speaking with Kenrick Burkholder, Director of Recruiting at Mina Group. Kenrick, say hi.
Hello. Very nice to meet you.
Welcome to the show. Welcome to the show. I'm delighted to have you on, like an expert like yourself, 13 years in various leadership positions. It's awesome. Do you want to give us a bit about your background, how you got to where you are today and who you are, all that kind of good stuff?
Absolutely. Yeah. I've been in hospitality for about 23 years now. As many people in this industry, I actually started my career as an actor. Then realized how much I enjoyed paying my bills and paying my rent. So what had been it's kind of a side hustle really became a career for me. I came into the Mina Group in 2010, so about 13 years ago, in an operational role. I worked through a few different operational roles in the company, and then about 6 or 7 years ago, I kind of sort of made the transition to our support services and our corporate department with human resources and recruiting. I kind of climbed the ladder through that. And I've been director of this department for a few years now. So I lead all recruiting strategy for the Mina Group company-wide. That encompasses about 35 different restaurants across 11 states and 2 countries, as well as our corporate roles. So, a fair amount of purview across quite a few roles. And what's really exciting for us is that we're growing really aggressively. So, our growth plan has us opening about 7 to 9 operations per year for the next 5 years or so, and then possibly expanding from there into several new markets and some new international markets as well, which is really, really exciting stuff when you work in recruiting.
Yeah, no, it's actually unreal. To have such a growth trajectory is amazing, but also I would imagine you're staring at it going, oh my God, I am responsible for a huge part of the success here.
I'll brag for 1 second in that I have the best team in the industry. My team just absolutely kills it. And we did our last 4 restaurant openings. On day 1, we were staffed at over 100%. And I don't know a lot of companies that could say that. That's I'm pretty proud of it. And we worked really hard to do it. And I hope we can keep that track record running.
Oh man, day 1 as well. Like to be able to hit that kind of figure on day 1 to launch that capacity really is almost unheard of. I'd say you did an unbelievable amount of interviews of people to make sure you got to those numbers.
We talked to a lot of people.
I can imagine. But on that very topic though, the fact that you were able to start with 100%, which is again, humble brag here, but unreal. That would imply to me that the candidate experience, so to speak, was phenomenal. And I know we spoke beforehand that you're a huge advocate of designing and crafting an unbelievable candidate experience. Do you want to walk us through your sort of ideology for that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll give you some background of kind of why I feel that way. Because I've been in the industry so long, I started as a barista in a coffee shop in college, right? And my very first jobs, it was day 1 training was here's the restaurant, here's your station, go to work. You'll figure out the menu as we go along, which is terrible, right? I can't imagine that happening. And it still does. You still hear horror stories of people that, there was no training, there was no onboarding. There was really no positive experience to it. And I think that's really tragic and really kind of unacceptable in the modern age. So much of your work around recruitment and hiring, happens before your first candidate is in the door, right? First off, you have to build a world-class company that values people and views them as not just a commodity, but as whole people. That it's when you work for a company, you're going to spend a third of your life at that company. Not a third of your life, but a third of your time, right? Yeah. In the doors with those people. They're your second family. So you really have to build a culture that supports that values people's time, values their interest. And so before you even have them in the door, you need to treat people with empathy, respect, and attention. So, I think candidate ghosting has been something that's been talked about a lot, especially in the post-pandemic world. We hear a lot of
Yeah.
companies where like, oh yeah, our no-show rate is, just insane. We have so much candidate ghosting. And we deal with that too, right? Every company in hospitality is going to deal with candidate ghosting. It's unavoidable. And what you do is you communicate as much as you can. When a candidate comes into our company, when you apply for, say, an hourly role in one of our outlets, the first thing that happens, you get a text message and an email within the first 3 minutes of you applying that has more information about us. Thanks you for applying. And it has some resources. So we work with some tools that enable people to apply via video. So it'll send you a quick video intro from the general manager, from the chef of that outlet. That's like, hey, thank you for applying. You can see my face. You get to learn a little about us. I'm going to talk a little bit about this restaurant, what we're about. I want to hear from you, what you're about, why you want to apply. Candidates have that opportunity to then, record a short 30-second video, send it to us. And then we want to start that process off immediately, so that my goal is every candidate is handled within the first 24 hours. So the moment you come in the door, within 24 hours, if we're going to invite you in for an in-person interview and continue this process, that happens within 24 hours. Because we also have to acknowledge the reality that I think the stat is we're in the longest period of historic low unemployment in the history of the country, or at least like the past 100 years. So you got to know that it is a candidate's market, right? Like they don't want to work for us. They can walk next door and they can get another job. They can walk next door to that and get another job. There are restaurants that will hire them just for walking in the door. And our company's not one of those. We're going to make you jump through some hoops because we really want to hire great people.
Yeah.
So if we're going to ask you to go on that journey of the candidate experience, we have to treat you with that respect as well. So, we process your resume within the first 24 hours, where we'll review that resume. We'll make sure that you're a fit based on your background, your criteria, the availability, the skill set we need. And then you'll get a text message, you'll get an email inviting you to schedule an interview. It links directly to our hiring manager's calendars so that you can schedule a time that works for you. And that it's really easy to use. You can set up, there's so many tools to do this, but it's really easy for a candidate to say, oh, great, this manager is available on Tuesday at 3:00. I'm going to book that slot. And then once you do that, you're going to get a calendar invite. You're going to get an email reminder the night before. We're going to send you you're going to get a personalized text message from that hiring manager 3 hours before your interview that says, hey, this is Chris at Bourbon Steak. I'm really looking for our interview today at 1:00. We'll see you soon. If you have any questions, shoot me a message, right? Just something super quick, super simple that lets you know, we know you're coming. We look forward to having you come in. And then when that candidate comes in, the whole hiring team has an email letting them know that like this person's coming in for an interview. So in that event that the general manager or the hiring manager that they were scheduled with is occupied, right? Whether they're stuck in some meetings, whether they have to deal with an issue because, restaurants are really dynamic. There's always things going on. Yeah. We can still like engage with that candidate and say, hey, either we'll have you sit down with our other manager for a moment, or if we need 10 minutes, right? We say, hey, can we get you something to drink? You want some water? You want an iced tea or coffee? Just give us 10 minutes. We can treat them with some respect. We can value their time. And it is really important to value their time. So even if you have to ask someone to wait, you want to keep it to a minimum, and you want to recognize that like they're giving up some of their time. That part of it is almost half the battle, right? Getting them in the door and getting them to sit down for the interview is so much of the work. Our math is for every one successful interview that we're getting a strong candidate who interviews well and is a good fit for this position, not even accepting the role, we have to talk to about 100 people. We have to engage with about 100 candidates. It's almost a 1% ratio. So we will do this process a lot, and you get good at it.
This is what I was just going to say, because I have to say, I think we just heard the clearest ever best practices of like how to design a candidate experience right there. But you're also getting 100% at the start of the last few launches that you've had. So like those standards that you're looking for, that you're applying, you're also getting 100% hiring at the start of these last few launches that you've had. So I was just going to say, I mean, that's unbelievable, but you must have to go through so many candidates to get there. So
we go through a lot.
Yeah, like you're saying, to find the one, you got to go through 100 to like maybe get to that one person. Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, it works for you. I mean, but it's actually just the numbers are so massive. You know what I mean? I'm like, wow, like that's I mean, a lot. Like when I'm hearing that, I'm like, wow, like the rigor that you guys are putting into to maintain that best practice. Because I know you guys are more of an elevated dining experience as well,
Yeah.
like a bit of a fine dining. So like, and I hear this from like sort of the country clubs and the resorts that we work with, and the other fine dining guests that I've had on, that they make this point as well, that it's like it's not as simple as just getting a body in and interviewing them. It's like there's a lot more criteria that goes in. But do you think because you have such an elevated criteria that you almost need to, because you're competing, like I know you want to get across like the best employee brand, but because you're fighting at a sort of like loftier air, you know, so to speak, do you find that you have to bring your A game all the time as well? Like it's A game or nothing.
Yeah, I mean, you always have to, especially at the upper tiers of hospitality. You have to, because one of the reasons you have to do it is because that's what we're going to expect from them. And I think you know, candidates they're all people, and they're smart people. Like they understand that as well. So for you to show that you have your house in order and that, you know, you really know your business and you're really on top of things, that your training programs are developed, your onboarding programs are developed for the right candidate, that is a net positive. You know, our one of the things we do for every single role in our company is that a stage is part of the process. For those not in industry parlance, stage is like an audition shift, right? It was in culinary where they'd come in for a day and they'd spend time in the kitchen. We need to make sure they know how to use a knife. We need to make sure like they know how to break down a dish. They know how to cook a dish. They can work clean. They can work organized. It's like an audition. We do that with everything. We do it with bartenders. We do it with busboys. We do it with literally every position, where we want to see you on the floor. We want to see how you interact with guests, how you interact with our team, and do you have your house in order? And now for some candidates, that seems like, why do I need to do this, right? I've been a server for 10 years. I know how to serve. They don't need to see me on the floor for a day. But for us, it's not just about like, you can have phenomenal experience and be great at what you do and still not be the right fit for our company. Like it's finding that, you know, I almost hate to use the word culture fit because it's kind of trite, but
I was gonna angle that word.
When I train leaders in our company about hiring, one of the things I encourage them to think about is don't think culture fit, think culture plus, because the idea of culture fit is what happens with culture fit is you just look like people who look like yourself, that are like, oh, they have my background and my experience. That's not really what you're looking for. You're looking for culture add. You're looking for, does their background, experience, and knowledge actually add to what we have? So it can be really different and diverse and can still be a net positive for your operation. And that can be a huge plus. You know, we've run into some people that maybe were light on experience, but just on attitude alone, we were like, they're a hire. We hired a chef one time who, you know, it was for a leadership position. He had to go through a tasting process, but he was so organized. He was hired before he had cooked a single dish. Yeah. I mean, we knew that we're like, this guy will be such a fit for us because he brings in such a focus and organization that we know he's going to be great. And we know he's going to level up the people around him. I think what we bring and what other companies should bring is that mentality of that a rising tide raises all boats. So you want someone who is raising all boats. Our CEO tells a story about a Harvard rowing team about how for like a full year they focused on anything he could do to make the boat go faster, and kind of this mantra of, is what I'm doing making the boat go faster? Because that's our goal. You know, we want the boat to get faster. We want to get candidates in the door. We want to get them hired. We want to get them trained, and we want to get them, you know, performing on our teams to the top of their ability as fast as possible, and with everyone else, and bringing everyone else along for that ride as well. And that's really the goal in doing that.
Totally. And you know what's very interesting, and you've articulated it so well, because one of the things I kind of have a conversation with everybody about is attempting to define the intangibles that separates good from great in hospitality. And I think you've done a great job there. I had on very recently the director of hotel operations at Aman, which is that sort of very fancy, Aman Giri, those very 5-star hotels. And he was French, and we were laughing because I was like, oh, it's a bit of a je ne sais quoi, you know, like, what is it about somebody that has that? And like you kind of mentioned it, it's like an attitude thing that you see in people. And it's cool that you mentioned that you like literally put people on the floor, no matter what the role is, to like give them almost like a dry run to see how well they operate in that sort of environment, because again, like you're at such an elevated dining experience anyway, and people are coming to pay a lot of money for a really good dining experience with you guys, that like, you know, a good experience people will remember. They'll remember for a while. They'll probably come back in 6 months' time, kind of thing. You know what I mean? But a bad experience, they will never forget.
Well, I think one of the keys for us is we really value the hospitality. I mean, the food is a given, right? Your food has to be amazing. So totally. On the culinary side,
mistakes.
Like there are lots of restaurants with great food.
Yeah.
There are.
It's not like a patent.
It's not a patent, right? So you got to do the other stuff. You know, the hospitality has to be in line. And I think the key with that, and this has shifted over the last 40 years too. You know, if you went into a fine dining restaurant in 1986, it was a very different experience than it is in 2023. Hospitality has gotten really personal. I mean, you look at restaurants like 11 Madison Park, right? And they have members of their staff whose sole responsibility is to do background research on all their guests. Now, that's taking it to an absolute extreme.
Yeah.
But there are levels that you still do that, even in more casual operations, right? Keeping notes on regulars is an easy thing to do. It's so easy to track likes and dislikes of your regulars to make sure that, you know, you're giving them a great experience and you're recognizing those return guests. And new guests, it's so easy to, when it's a special occasion, right? The smallest thing you can do, they're coming in for an anniversary, handwritten card on their table when they arrive. We do that at all of our restaurants. And the number of times you see guests are like, this is like a handwritten card signed by their like management team. And people are shocked by it. And I'm like, why are you shocked? This costs us nothing. And it's just giving you a great experience. We want people who give that great experience.
Yeah,
there was a question. I used to ask this. I've kind of shifted it a little bit now, but I used to always ask a question in interviews give me an example of either yourself or a member of your team providing excessive hospitality. And it was always interesting to see how people answered it, because some people would be kind of thrown off by it and they're like, what? And that was almost always an immediate indicator that they weren't really a right fit for us. Because the people who were like, oh, I got examples, just wait. I'm like, this is what I want. This really gets it, that we're here to give people for 2.5 hours a really great one-of-a-kind experience. And we got to find the people who that is their goal.
Yeah, I mean, which is amazing. And again, because we mentioned that like at your elevated air, the battle for talent is even harder again, because you're looking for really, really good talent. So I guess like, you know, you guys must have an unbelievable program for like keeping the talent you have today, given you don't really want to go out to market and interview 100 people to get one person in.
I just pulled this data last week for I was kind of reviewing all of our turnover data for Q3. And you know, some of our outlets perform better than others. Some of them are a little more casual. It's a little bit high. It's understandable. We have a restaurant loss. Excuse me. I'm coming off a little bit of a lung infection.
I've got the same one as well.
We have a restaurant in Los Angeles. You know, Los Angeles notorious for high turnover in restaurants because, you know, you have this giant percentage of the population that are, you know, they're working actors, they work in the film industry, and this is kind of their side hustle. Our turnover in that restaurant is under 5%, which is just crazy town.
Okay.
It's 3.8%, which is impossible. That's like in 6 months they had 2 positions turnover, right?
Yeah.
I mean, find a restaurant for me in the country that has that. It's just crazy. And it's just a testament to our leaders on both the front of house and back of house, building a team that is cohesive and all going in the same direction, you know, focused on guest experience. I mean, they make my job so easy.
I was going to say, I feel like fully stuffed up. And
yes and no. So, I mean, on the one hand, I don't have to do a lot of work for them. But when we do have to open a role, you better believe we are looking for the right person.
Yeah.
I mean, we got to get that person who continues that culture and who, you know, builds this great culture. Culture plus. It's all about culture plus. And it comes down to just like valuing people holistically in that, like, you know, one of the questions I ask when I interview general managers and chef, and actually managers across the board, I always ask a question about what they do in their free time. Because our industry, especially for salaried managers, it ain't a 40-hour a week gig. It's just not. It's never going to be. It's a lot of hours. And so I say, what do you do to fill your cup back up? It can be, burnout can be a real thing in this industry. So what do you do to make sure you have balance? And I think a lot of them take it as kind of a throwaway question. I think it is such an important question. And some people go in it with, oh no, I love work. I'm totally fine working 80 hours. I'm like, that's not my question. That's concerning for me. Like, I want you to have a whole life outside of this. Like, we shouldn't be your whole life. You should have other stuff going on. I mean, I want you to be passionate about what you do, but here I hand make guitars. I breed leopard geckos. I've gotten some crazy answers, and they're great. I love them all the time because it tells me that like you're able to achieve some balance and that you value that in members of your team. So like, when someone comes in and go, oh, I have this thing, I'm performing in a concert, I need this day off, that's kind of the nature of our industry. You're going to have some flexibility here. So having leaders that have that understanding and can provide that is so important.
So like on that exact question about leaders, okay. So you're hell bent on finding sort of culture plus employees, because you can teach service to people. So you're looking for that culture plus that like elevates them. So you're really finding effectively like restaurant leaders, hospitality leaders, and putting them into different roles in the restaurant. When you think about leadership, then you say, okay, we've got a whole slate of people across 13 plus restaurants or whatever the number is. Okay. Mm-hmm. How do you like look for the people to say, you know what, who are the ones that we see are the next GMs here? Like, how do I look at those people and find those?
It's three things: intellectual curiosity, empathy, and drive.
I love how you got that down in one go.
Literally, that's the recipe. If you have those three things, I mean, you can do almost anything, right? And all three of them are important. It's if you have drive, you can succeed. If you have intellectual curiosity, you can learn, and if you have empathy, you can lead. So we need all three, right? And they're like equally important.
I was going to say, I was like, which one is more important than the other?
But, one of the questions I get a lot from candidates are, they'll ask about culture of our company, or they'll say, what makes someone successful in Mina Group? And usually my number one answer is intellectual curiosity. Are you someone who wants to push yourself forward and be stronger tomorrow than you are today? And that's one of our key values. And that's something that we've really built a lot of resources into. I mean, many years ago, Michael helped develop Recipe Exchange, which is a repository of every recipe in our entire company. And it's accessible to every member of the company. If you are a line cook in Seattle and you're curious what they're doing in Dubai, you can go on, you can look at the recipe. There are sometimes videos of them making that dish. There will be wine pairings. There'll be allergies. There'll be techniques broken down. It'll have all the components broken down, and you can even see where those components might be used in other dishes in other places in our company, so that we're kind of sharing that knowledge across the board with all of our culinarians and non-culinarians. I mean, there's a dish on my Thanksgiving table that was absolutely served in one of our restaurants.
That's amazing, and it's also a real what do they say in Peloton? No ego, amigo. It's like chefs and stuff, like sharing that knowledge for the benefit of everybody.
100%. And then in the last 2 years, we've expanded that with rolling out a robust LMS that has just a ton of resources so people can train on other aspects of the job, right? Learning InDesign, right? If you want to learn more about what our marketing team does and design work, if you want to learn more about recruitment, if you want to learn more about HR, if you want to delve deeper into financial acumen, how to read a P&L, how to do theoretical food costing, building resources out for your team to learn that stuff, even if it's not in their lane. That's one of the things I encourage my team to do. I go, look, I encourage you guys to get out of your own lane. It is totally fine because people have different interests. People are good at different things. There's a member of my team who speaks several languages. It is a skill I do not have. And every now and again, another department's like, we got to translate some of this stuff. I go, talk to Maggie on my team. She's great at that stuff. She's really into it. Like, she's done a lot of translation work for us. And that's also a great resource you can have, especially in this industry. You'll get lots of Spanish speakers. In Hawaii, we get people who speak Micronesian and a few other languages. So if you can build some of your collateral resources, your even offer letters or emails in other languages, so that you should engage with that candidate base. Why not do it? I mean, it's a little bit of work for a lot of game.
Totally. You just reminded me of a funny memory in a job I had where it said I was proficient in business German. And then lo and behold, a piece of German comes in and they're like, Alex, translate this. And I was like, well, it was kind of like a long time ago. I was in university. I recognize some of these words. Yeah, let's just use Google Translate photo for this. And I skulked away. Took that off the resume. Although I'm loving Duolingo now, I have to say. I'm on like 560 days.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, just sneaking it in 2 minutes before midnight.
If you put juggling on your resume, you better be ready for them to hand you 3 balls.
Yeah, you better be ready. I mean, that's the thing. That's the great thing about the resumes. And you know what's interesting, actually, on the topic of resumes? And I was saying to you, I had the head of leadership development training at Chick-fil-A, Manasiaki, on recently. And we were talking about that very topic about like resumes and how at Chick-fil-A, for example, which obviously is not a similar business to yours, but conceptually to say in hospitality.
I hire people from Chick-fil-A all the time.
Totally. I mean, she's responsible for why they're so good. And
their training programs are phenomenal.
Phenomenal. And one of the things she said was that they had a long time and a long discussion about whether or not to include university degrees as part of their leadership program. That like to graduate up the ranks within the organization, that you needed that. But a lot of people in hospitality don't have a lot of like university degrees. And we're there obviously just talking about our resumes and degrees obviously sitting on ours. And there they got rid of it and they were able to open up a whole new pool of talent for themselves to like promote and give the training they needed to potentially own a franchise or like go up the corporate ladder from the restaurant itself.
I think for us, we only have maybe 1 or 2 positions for which that is a requirement.
Yeah.
It is optional on almost everything. And in operations roles, it's always optional. I mean, we'll put, for like a restaurant GM or an executive chef, we'll put, culinary degree preferred. It's not disqualifying. Like that gives you a certain knowledge base and it can give you a leg up at the beginning of your career. But I know Michelin-starred chefs who never went to culinary school, and I know Michelin-starred chefs who do. It is completely possible to be very successful in this industry without a degree. I mean, and I think culturally, I think we're going in the direction that even outside of hospitality, people are starting to look well past that aspect of resume. I mean, the degree stuff matters so much less than actual experience.
Oh man, I mean, I would agree with you. I mean, like that. I mean, for me, it's in marketing, for example. So anyone who's listening, that's what I do. I do marketing, and it's exactly that. As in, like, the discriminating factors for me are basically is somebody even capable of doing the job. You know what I mean? Like when I think about the pipeline of candidates that I have, it's like, how do I build up a populated, diverse pool of people from all different walks of life, and then give them an opportunity to present to me before I make a decision on whether or not they kind of come in, so that everybody has an opportunity to speak, irrespective of whether they have a job degree or not, or whether they're based in the United States or they're based in South America or wherever, because I can hire anybody from all over the globe, So like it kind of gives me this kind of random perspective that I don't need those sort of traditional heuristics to say I need to hire somebody who went to Stanford or Harvard if you want to join this tech company, you know what I mean? Which is just like nonsense. Not that I want to denigrate those schools. They're in the press enough this week, so I don't need to kick them when they're down. But like, you know what I mean? I don't need to like look at it that way, even for my own hiring. And I think that's definitely a normalized trend. And I mean, my background is in online education as well, which was like creating an alternative to engineering degrees from like your Carnegie Mellons and wherever, that like there are people that can learn these skills if you give them the opportunity, that can be as good as the kids who come out of these sort of engineering schools across the country.
100%.
Yeah, just don't. And it's just access to opportunity. I mean, like that's ultimately like kind of what it is. I mean, like obviously we're both fortunate that we were born into a type of opportunity to go and do what we want to do. And then we're sitting here having this podcast, but not everybody has that. And so like, how do you design a system or a product that can kind of enable that for people, especially in this country where
what I found interesting, when it comes to like some of our roles that fall on the corporate side, when you're talking like accounting, funding, marketing, all of that, I always ask, is their experience in hospitality, is that a prerequisite? And they're like, not necessarily. And I go, let me rephrase that. I mean in operations. I don't mean have they worked in marketing and hospitality. Have they worked in a restaurant? And I always get a no, and I go, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to give a little preferential treatment to candidates in hospitality, and it's not because it makes them understand what we do. It's because hospitalitarians deep down just have hustle. You know, they are. It was sort of one of those things that happened during the pandemic, right? There was this perception that was propagated by some people that, oh, you know, all these restaurant workers are now getting all this unemployment, so they're just sitting on their butts. And I'm like, yeah, that's not happening. That's not. I mean, maybe that's 1%. Restaurant workers, they're sharks. They need to be swimming. They need to be moving and doing stuff. They're losing their minds otherwise. That's why you had suddenly all these people were, you know, creating side hustles, creating little catering. I created a catering business during the pandemic when I was furloughed. You know, everyone they need stuff to do. They need to be busy. So if you take someone who worked in restaurants for a sizable period of time, and they took a pivot, you are going to be shocked by the performance of that person in their role. You know, if they step in,
I would agree.
You're going to be like, why do they keep giving me results so damn fast? And I'm like, because that's the way they're wired. Like, they're wired to just go.
But you know what it also, which I think, and I used to always say this, but I used to like hiring people from hospitality, or people who were in high school and they worked in a restaurant or a pizza place or whatever. And I always say, like, it teaches people humility.
Yes.
You know, like the amount of whatever word you want to say, negative experiences that I'm sure every single server has faced. You develop a thick skin, you know, very quick in that. And
working in direct customer service for a couple of years really poises you well to do well in corporate culture.
Totally. Like, nothing can phase you. Nothing you can say can phase you, you know? I mean, I totally agree with that. Sorry, I'm also going to cough. But yeah, so like, I mean, that's fascinating. Tell me though, you know, fine dining, could have more exalted air restaurants like yours. And forgive me if I'm saying exalted air in a sense, but like when I hear of like technology change and I hear about all the different things that are happening to restaurants, where I hear it the most is hearing it from like franchise groups. You know, we had CTO CKE, they own Hardee's and Carl's Jr. on. Phil Crawford, he was talking about like AI, ChatGPT drive-throughs, where people would drive through and you think you're talking to a human, but it's actually just a ChatGPT, and it's basically impossible to make an error because all the errors that happen in the drive-through seemingly are from humans, not from the machine itself. And so I hear that a lot for franchise groups, or like robots and, you know, kiosks in Shake Shack replacing sort of the human kind of server kind of element. And obviously that's kind of slightly different for you guys because people are paying for the human side of things. And so I'm curious the role of technology and AI, how you see it evolving for, say, you in your role and in your business.
So, yeah, I mean, on that end, we're very much the opposite of that. Yeah. And our philosophy is the opposite of that. And now I get it. When you're talking QSR restaurants, you know,
totally.
Getting labor cost as low as you possibly can makes a ton of sense. And if you have an AI tool that can take orders for you instead of just a person, great, right? But also your customer experience there is just a very different animal. It's your customer experience is entirely based on speed. It has one metric, and it is how fast can you get people in, out, and their food. That is not ours at all. The key metric of our customer experience is the experience.
Totally.
And if anything, we want more human touch on it. So, you know, a hallmark of a lot of our restaurants is we do a lot of tableside presentations. We give you a bit of a dinner and a show. Like, you come in and we have multiple dishes that will involve some element that it takes a person to do them at your table and is more engaging. And they'll be engaging in conversation. They'll talk about the dish. They'll talk about the history of the dish. It's storytelling. Right. Yeah. That's what we're doing. I think that's what separates higher end dining is the kind of the storytelling that goes into it.
Interesting.
Back when I was in operations, I was a very good salesman, and I was very good at selling wine.
I have no doubt you were a great salesman.
I was very good at selling wine. And one of the things that I realized a long time ago is when people are buying wine, they're very rarely buying it on taste. The flavor, I'm dead serious.
I want 1,000% subscribe to that. I think my wallet would subscribe to that as well.
Taste is now. Look, you have some taste preferences that definitely comes into it, right? Like if someone is a Chardonnay drinker and all you have is like big, bold, like Côte Rôtie Syrah, yeah, not the right wine for that person.
Yeah, maybe
you got to get. But we'll have lists that have 2,000 bottles on them sometimes. So if you're someone who's not a wine expert, I mean that is just so intimidating. And so what I would always do is I would try to learn not just kind of the history of it, but like some fun things about it. There was a wine we had on one of our lists. I can't remember exactly what it was. But the thing I remembered about it was that the winemakers lived on an island. And every morning they would take this little rowboat to the vineyards to go work in the vineyards. And anytime someone would ask about this wine, I go, oh, this wine's super cool. The owners live on this little island. They take this little boat across to get into the vines. The vines get these kind of fog roll in. But then they have to take everything by boat back. Has nothing to do with the way this wine tastes. The little story about this couple taking a little rowboat. People would buy the wine every single time. 100% of the time. They go, that sounds amazing. What sounded amazing? The story of how that wine was made. It had nothing to do with how it tastes. It was about kind of like the fun journey I went on with that wine.
Totally. But you just reminded me of, I'm not sure if you ever watched Mad Men back in the day.
Oh, yeah.
And he's talking about cigarettes.
It's toasted.
Another out of parlayed wine and cigarettes. But he makes a line and he said, like, advertising is based on one thing. It's on happiness.
Yeah.
And
100%.
You're telling me such a fun story. And I have no doubt that every single person you regaled with that story had a smile in their face and they go, you know what, that's the one for me. You know what I mean?
It's the thing of, right, like what's the difference between service and hospitality? Service is what they did. Hospitality is how they made you feel.
Yeah.
So it's about how we make the guests feel in our restaurants. And that translates to hiring, right? How do we make candidates feel during their interview? Did they feel their time was valued? What the worst thing that happens in my job, and it happens every now and again, where I have a candidate who had a bad experience. And they told me, they like emailed me and they said, hey, I kind of feel like I was wasting his time. He kept checking his phone. And I mean, I have come down hard on some leaders in my company. I was like, hey man, we can't do that. Like I understand how busy you are, but for at least the 15 or 20 minutes of that interview, you got to keep your phone in your pocket. Like you need to.
That's all I'm asking.
You need it. In fact, the best thing you can do is start off the interview. Go, so if that's gonna happen, you should let them know, right? You should give them the answer to the test and say, hey, we have some stuff going on. I might have to take a call on this. So I apologize in advance and I'm going to do my best I won't do that.
Totally. I mean, you're managing expectations 101, but I think the candidate experience is so important. I mean, and there isn't much of a difference between hospitality and say tech in that regard. Cause we're in a similar battle for talent and people have got competing offers everywhere. And you're like, how do we get them in as fast as possible? How do we interview them as fast as possible? How do we show them who we are as fast as possible? I always laugh and it's for us, our marketing channels are say LinkedIn, email, and a few bits and bobs. And people see that in the interview and they go, we hired somebody recently. She's like, oh, I saw all the videos you guys put on LinkedIn. And I was like, oh my God, it works. It might not be working for the right customer, but at least we got somebody who started working here, who saw what we were doing. And it's okay, building on that employee brand, which is so key. I think I've interviewed, this is the 20th episode of the long form podcast that I've done. And I've done, I'd say about 15 other shorter form ones. And one thing I hear again and again and again and again and again, and what's absolutely cuts the wheat from the chaff, so to speak, in successful restaurant groups is this difference in culture. And what I mean by that, I'm curious your take on this, okay? Is that anyone can copy your restaurant tomorrow. I mentioned we were talking about patents. There's no patent on a recipe. There's literally nothing about a restaurant whatsoever that is innately kind of patentable, So anyone could actually go and copy any restaurant, okay? But you guys are at 13, okay? And you're growing to even more now very, very soon. Wasn't it, we said 5 more? Is it 5 more next month or 5 more next year? Is that what you're saying?
Not next month. We're doing, I think about we're doing about 7 in 2024. And 4 of those are in Q1. It's really
busy time. And so what's the difference between somebody who can only open 1 and you guys going to like 17 in Q1 or something, like a huge number.
Organization. I mean, it's all about organization.
Exactly.
You build, you find the systems that work, and you templatize it to a degree, right? The tricky part with us is none of our restaurants are cookie cutter, and I mean none of them, right? Like you open a McDonald's, you open a McDonald's. They're all pretty much the same thing. I mean, the layout might be different, but they're pretty similar. We opened 2 restaurants with the same name. They're totally different. Their menus are not even the same. Like, they're all snowflakes. But the systems you have in place, in the way you train people, the way you roll out new things, the way you build your systems, you can organize that stuff like crazy. And it starts at hiring, and then it goes to training, and then it goes to operating, right? Kind of in that order.
Totally.
And it's an absolute controllable too. It's something you have complete control over, because with a lot of things, right? Response to marketing, you don't really control that. You hope you put out your marketing with what you hope to get back.
You're like this, like Mr. Burns. I'm like, I don't know.
You're even your food to a degree, right? Like you can execute food that you think is delicious, but the general public may feel differently. Like you might have a dish that you think is going to be your signature dish, and then it's just not. It's something else. You can't control those. So the things you can control, that's where you put in your lion's share of work. You put the effort to take those things and make them perfect, or as close to perfect as you can possibly get.
And it's interesting you say that, because it's like those processes that you can control the most, like, are like a greenhouse. You know what I mean? Like you can kind of get like a well done process as repeatable as you can get it. It's sort of like your sort of fine dining, where it's like not necessarily like McDonald's, and it's the exact same one. But to be able to pull that off has enabled you to be able to speak to 100% launches, of staff, interviewing 100 people, to be able to give you the ability and the capacity to do that. You've been able to greenhouse that internally as a process, which is just like phenomenal. I love using the word greenhouse in this kind of context, because it's like giving it room to grow. Like for me, when I hear like people are able to grow restaurant groups, restaurant after restaurant after restaurant, in a space with like eminently copyable, like anybody can look at that restaurant and go, I want to do exactly that. But to be able to pull it off, there's a cultural and process difference that matters.
The thing that's really bananas to me is that how often I hear from people about, why did you leave your former job? They're like, well, they just really didn't have any training. That is an answer that is so inexplicable to me, because it is a thing you have complete control over.
Totally.
That you chose not to pay attention to. And I'm like, why would you ever make the choice to take a thing you have total control over and just toss it? It's just like the things you have control over, refine them. Like put in the work, refine them. Because all it will do is pay dividends.
I'm going to say, is that your last word? Or is there, because that's a real adamant, like, control your controllables and just own those.
Control your controllables, man.
Control your controllables. But like, if I was to say we're going to finish up the podcast now, is there anything, if anybody was listening, you'd be like, of all the things you said, we've been talking for 44 minutes now. Of all the things I know, unreal.
I'm a good talker.
I'm a good listener, apparently. I mean, my missus wouldn't say that, but like everybody else would say I am. Tell me though, like, what would be a key takeaway here that you said, like, if you were like, of all the things you said, like, please go home with this?
Oh man, I'll do 2.
Go for it.
To candidates, always ask some questions. Always have some questions. And make them hard, because a good employer should be able to answer hard questions.
I like that.
And to employers, all of your people are people, and treat them that way.